I was reading a commentary and it said that the woman at the well was probably the longest where Jesus talked to an individual. So he had a good study with her. So here we're going to start in chapter 3 with just a little bit. We don't have to turn there, but I just want to talk a little bit about Nicodemus. Jesus was talking to Nicodemus, and Jesus said, "You're a respected Jewish leader." That's what Nicodemus. And he's talking to him, and he's telling him things, and Nicodemus, how's that? How can you be baptized, enter water in your mother's womb again? You can't do that. You can't be born of. How is that so? To be born of spirit? I don't understand. This was Nicodemus, and Jesus is telling him, how is it you don't understand these things? You're the Jewish religious leader. Jesus really was kind of hard on Nicodemus. I mean, just, I don't know how much you can get out of reading, but you can just tell by what he was saying to him. You don't understand. And Jesus was like, you're the man, you're the Jewish leader, you're the man. But what I think that shows is Jesus is comfortable with whoever he talks. I feel pretty comfortable talking to anybody, but there are some people that I feel real uncomfortable talking to. And Jesus never had that problem. He talked to people no matter the background, no matter their nationality, social status, where they came from, who they were. How we know this is, look who he picked for his disciples. Different backgrounds. I mean, the disciples couldn't even get along at the start. So we see Jesus at ease with the people he's talking to. So we go to the first, John 4, we're starting there. Jesus is leaving Jerusalem, going north to Galilee. He picks the shortest route through Samaria. A Jew going through Samaria. Now, from what I read, it says that most Jews would have crossed the Jordan on the other side and went up the other side and got past Samaria and crossed back over. It's kind of like me going through Atlanta to go to Myrtle Beach or Daytona Beach. We don't go through Atlanta. We go through South Carolina and around, but not through Atlanta. It's about an hour and a half difference, but that trip through Atlanta can be 5 minutes, it could be really easy, or it could be 3 hours. So we don't ever want to take that chance. We just move on. We just wonder, how did the Samaritans get to where they weren't liked? And again, this goes back to 2 Kings, where the Assyrians, through one of the times when put into exile, and they moved people around. People moved into the spots they moved people from. Mixed races got together. And that's what's going on here. The displaced population left intermarried with pagans. So the Samaritans weren't liked at all. We've all watched Westerns. You know how the Indians were? They were half-breeds. So basically that's what was going on here. They didn't have a home. Half-breeds, half Indian, half white. There was no middle ground. They were hated on both sides. So as we see, and we're getting to where Jesus is going to come to this well and meet this lady, where the tensions are. Now, so they get to Sychar, well, that's the city or the town. The well was about a half a mile out of town. When they got there, they left Jesus and the disciples went to get food. A Samaritan woman comes out at noon to draw water from the well. And what's odd about that? Anybody got any ideas why that's odd?
This wasn't the time that most of the ladies came to draw water.
She came at the hottest time of the day to draw water. That makes it pretty hard on you, don't it? When you know you're not wanted somewhere, look down on. It's let me see. I guess it's right here. Jacob's well. Does anybody know anything about Jacob's well? Jacob's well is still around. You can go there today and drink water from it. It's in a church, the Church of Jacob's Well. Imagine that. But you can still go there and draw water from Jacob's Well. It's been around, what would you put that, about 4,000 years? So it's been around a long time. A lot of people have drank from that well. A lot of animals were watered from that well. So that is a pretty good, well known. So Jesus gets there and he asks, again, the woman, why she was there. Traditionally, the women went early in the morning. It was a social event. They got out there, they gabbed at each other, said what was going on in the neighborhood, how their kids were doing, all that stuff. But this woman at the well, she didn't have that. Didn't have that social connection. Matter of fact, she didn't want that social connection because she was talked about or made fun of, and they're all going pointing. So here we are. Jesus asked for a drink. With a little bit of attitude, she points out, what are you doing asking me for a drink? You're a Jew, and you don't ask Samaritans for anything. And I'm putting this in there. He was a man and she was a woman, and that was a cultural no-no. See, this is where Jesus wasn't worried about culture. Wasn't worried about stereotypes, about any of that stuff. I was reading one of the commentaries and it says he went the shortest route between where they were at to Samaria. The shortest route. The commentary said he had a mission. He knew why he was going there. Now, the woman at the well had no clue why he was going there. But Jesus knew. He knew he was going to talk to this lady. So he asked for a drink. She kind of goes back at him with, you know, how is it you asked me for a drink? Jesus says in verse 10, if you knew the gift of God and who is asking for the drink, you would ask him if he would give you living water. When we're talking to somebody, so this lady, we'll see a little bit later, she knew history. But when we talk to somebody, we don't jump right in, do we? I mean, Jesus is saying, okay, you knew who you were asking. You would ask for something else. I think that sometimes this is where we miss opportunities. Jesus is not missing an opportunity. Matter of fact, she kind of just hits it right to him. You know, she's okay. She's still not knowing who he is. Because she says, how are you going to get that living water? You don't have anything to draw from the well. And it's deep. Jacob's well is 134 feet deep. Has anybody ever drawn water from a well? Was it that deep? My grandpa had a well. It was probably 40 feet deep. That's a long way to haul a bucket of water to the top of the well. If a lot of the kids were in here, they wouldn't do what? Yeah, you turn the faucet, the water comes out. No, not really. That ain't how it works. You pull that bucket up, you have a dipper, you might get a drink. But that's what she's asking. How are you going to get this water? This living water you're talking about. You can't even, don't have nothing to draw it out with. And there's another thing that's, speaking of water, there's another thing that's unacceptable. So he don't even have a cup. No, I know there are some of us that wouldn't drink after anybody else. But a Jew and a Samaritan definitely would not drink after each other, or even use the utensils to eat after each other with the same utensils. So he don't have the cup, and she's still thinking he wants a drink of water. Which he's been traveling through the desert for quite a while, so that might be part of it. But he's offered something else, something a whole lot more. She kind of goes into the history of the well. Well, Jacob dug this well. It was given to us. It was, he brought us these animals here. So she knows her histories. She knows exactly what went on and who it was that dug the well. And Jesus is talking about living water. In verse 13, he says, everyone who drinks living water, or everyone who drinks this water, that's water from the well, will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst, need the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life. Now she comes back with a pretty good answer in my mind, but she's still not understanding. And she's still not understanding like Nicodemus didn't understand. But Jesus isn't really coming back at her with the same veracity that he came back at Nicodemus, because Nicodemus should have known. This lady is learning on the spot. She asked, she said, "Oh, give me some of this living water so I'll never have to come here and draw water again." Now, it's interesting. Why wouldn't she want to go to the well? She's embarrassed. She says, "Give me this water so I don't have to come here again." It would probably be, when my grandfather at his house, the well, we'd have to get up every morning, draw water for coffee, for whatever you were doing, wash your hands, wash your face in the morning. You drew stuff out of the well. We only had to walk from here to the back door. That's about how far it was. A half a mile to walk, long way to walk to get a drink. And to do it every day, it would probably most commonplace, right? Second nature. When it's something you have to do to sustain yourself, it really isn't that not that hard. It's not a burden. Because you don't know any better, do you? It's like, so my grandpa got piped in water, and all of a sudden nobody went to the well no more. Now my grandpa wouldn't drink. You had to go to the well, get a bucket of water to make his coffee because he wasn't drinking anything that come out of that faucet. So sometimes we get lost in the nature of how things go, and I love that things are made easier. I don't have to walk home after church. I mean, Jesus and the disciples had just walked there from about 90 miles, give or take. So that's about a 3-day walk to get to where he was at. She said, "Give me some of that water." Jesus told her, "Hey, go get your husband and come back." This is where it gets to me.
I'm reading up about bear with me if I don't have my glasses. I'll read this. It's called Building Bridges. It says, "Have you ever wondered how to build a bridge in a believer?" This passage of Jesus provides us with an excellent model, reaching out to those who are different from us. We talk with unbelieving individuals about your faith. Follow Jesus' example. First, accept them for who they are and who they are at in their spiritual life. One way you can do this or demonstrate this is acceptance with allowing them to speak their needs. Jesus did that when he asked for drink. Such acceptance not only deepens friendship, it makes people more willing to let you be their spiritual. Second, meet their needs. Jesus did as much when he promised her what she needed most. Water. An illustration of living water. that third revealed Jesus to them as the Messiah, Savior of the world. And they false relationship with Jesus, they will soon declare what their doubts. We no longer believe because of what he said. Now we have heard for ourselves. We need you and it really is the Savior of the world. A pretty good example of trying to bridge the gap between the conversation and meet their needs, they can that makes sense.
Yes. Because we see in this story that he is not ridiculing, not giving the hard questions like he gave Nicodemus, right? He knew his audience. He knew that she really needed somebody to talk to and somebody that would, as I always tell the kids, you listen with your ears, not your mouth. Somebody to listen. And Jesus was a perfect example of, like Bubba said, he was making that bridge to meet this woman where she was at without ridiculing. And that would be very unusual for a Jew and a Samaritan to be together and not have some sort of backfighting. Or just that, I said a little earlier that she was being when she kind of goes at him, who are you to ask me for a drink? Well, if you knew. So he is being, I want to say cautious, but that's not really what I mean. He's being acceptive.
I think maybe he was taking advantage of the opportunity. Make you think about any opportunity you miss. The doors open. Did you ever try to go just bring about nothing?
So she says, Jesus says, go get your husband. She says, I have no husband. Then Jesus goes, you're right. You have 5. And the man you're with right now is not your husband. Now I'm going to stop there for a second. And if we went to John chapter 2, verse 24 and 25, I got it right here. I'll read it so you don't have to turn there. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people. He did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person. He knew her before he got there. Now, how many of us would immediately try to say something about divorce or being with a guy that you're not married to? Or Jesus didn't do any of that. Sometimes we start preaching before we start thinking. Jesus didn't have that trouble here. Because she answered him because he asked the question. You're right, you don't have. When he gets done saying you've got 5, and this one ain't your husband, she says, sir, I can see you're a prophet. And that's where this John goes to. He knew all people. He knew her. Then we go to, she starts a history lesson. What I'll say is a history lesson. And she says, sir, I can see you're a prophet. Our ancestors were worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place we must worship is in Jerusalem. Now that would be hard, right? My mom and dad worshiped at the Flat Rock Church of Christ. When I went to Freed Hardeman College, I worshiped at Jack's Creek Church of Christ. It was not my home church. It was different. What's good about today is we don't have to go to Jerusalem to worship. We're here today to worship. Here today to love what God's given us. But Jesus goes into this. He says, woman. He said, woman, believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from Jews. Yet the time is coming, and it has now come. So she should have got a clue right there, right? A time is coming, and has now come. Jesus is standing right in front of her. We've been watching The Chosen, and if you see, it's at the end of season 1, the scene of that. Season 2, end of season 2, this right here. She's at the well. And it says, yet a time is coming and has now come. That means Jesus is sitting right in front of her. When the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers and the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in spirit and in truth. The lady says then, the lady dwell says then, well, I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming, and when he comes, he will explain everything to us. Now, this is when Jesus does something kind of amazing to me. He says, you're looking for the Messiah? You're speaking to him. What would that do to us? I think sometimes if Jesus would walk in a room, a lot of people would leave. They might be offended by the way he's dressed or the way he carries himself forward. My grandma always said, be careful when you answer the door because you don't know who's knocking. And I'm not meaning bad people. Jesus may be knocking on that door. Or one of his angels is knocking on that door. And I always remember her telling me that. But Jesus declared, I'm the one speaking to you. This woman drops her water jar and takes off running. Now, she had just come to draw water with her jar, half a mile, and she left the jar and everything and ran back to the village to tell people. About this time, the disciples returned. And she goes into town and says, come see the man that's told me everything about my life. Everything. I actually believe, just in my heart, can't prove it, that she was one of the greatest evangelists we ever had. She went and told everybody she can find in that village, come and see who is. She's bringing him to him. Jesus says he knows people He knew exactly what was going to happen. He was going to put it in her ballpark and let her run with it. His disciples, meanwhile, come back with food. And they learn another lesson. You know, you have food we need to eat, but y'all aren't understanding. There's a harvest. She just ran by it on the way to the village. Understand that the harvest is ripe for reaping. There's a time to reap. There's a time to sow. There's a time for the harvest. The disciples didn't say anything to Jesus about the woman at the well. I'm sure they were very curious what was going on. Right? I mean, wouldn't you be curious? We're curious when we walk up and somebody's talking to somebody, you know, we know the person, but we don't know the other person. What they're saying. Wonder what's going on over there. So I'm sure they had some thoughts. If they did, they didn't say much. But when he said, the disciple said, Rabbi, come and eat. No, I already got food. I have food that you don't know nothing about. You don't know anything about it. And again, the disciples here are going, oh, I wonder who brought him food. They didn't understand. And again, Jesus doesn't really interrogate or do anything other than say, listen here, you dunderheads. Have you not been listening? Because Roger, this would have been, what, about a year into his ministry? Is that what we're thinking? A year, 18 months, something like that? So they weren't understanding what was going on.
But because of this woman's testimony, and because Jesus stayed there for a few days, talked to those people, we just studied on Wednesday night about how Philip in Samaritan preached how receptive they were to the word. This could have been the groundwork that would be laid, so that later in Acts, when they went in to preach after Pentecost, these people were so receptive.
Later on in here, Roger just kind of alluded to it, that almost the whole town came back. Now, did they want to come back to see? I don't know what they wanted to see. I don't think they knew what they wanted to see. Do we have like what do you call it, somebody that can tell the future? A soothsayer, is that what they used to call them? No.
She was convinced she'd met the Messiah. She brought it.
Oh, yes. Yeah. She was convinced. Well, she knew. He told her, I'm him. They come back to see for themselves. And like Roger said, they had asked him to stay. Stay and teach us, please. Wow. Stay and teach us, please. Many things come out of this story, the woman at the well. One of the big things I think is what I read, the evangelism she did, going to tell everybody and bringing people back, really spread the gospel into places that it might not otherwise go. Like you said, that Ethiopian eunuch come from there, he had learned there, learned of Christ there, or of the Messiah there, So this was a big deal. One lady at the well, who we do not know her name, I'd get in trouble. I always say, if I say woman to Mary, you get in trouble when you say something like that. Woman? No. Yeah, that's a term of getting whacked upside the head with a pan. So, again, we don't know her name. To me, that means you don't have to have a big name. You don't have to have Joel Osteen. You don't have to have a bunch of the other great preachers out there. You don't have to have a name. You don't have to be Josh. You don't have to be Roger. You don't have to be Mike. Because any one of us sitting here can say something that will absolutely hit somebody's ear, and they'll say, "It's interesting, I need to learn more." And if somebody needs to learn more and is really ready to learn more, they are going to come to you to learn more because you introduced them to the question that they want the answer to. And I think that's the whole thing, the woman at the well. She had a big question, and she got a big answer. You're waiting for the Messiah, you don't have to wait for him. I'm standing right here. Because of that little thing, because Jesus had patience, because Jesus had a temperament that lended itself to listening, not being overbearing, because sometimes when we teach, we want to listen. I don't have all the answers at all. Matter of fact, I have more questions myself about this story than I have answers. We know that when Jesus left to come to Samaria, he left because they were saying he was baptizing people. And he was in the lead. He had more baptisms than John. That isn't the case. I don't know one person Jesus baptized. The disciples did all the baptizing. So Jesus was the teacher. And his love for people in any aspect of life or social status or any of that was love. Well, that's all I got today. I leave you with, remember, Jesus comes in love, comes to us in love. I want to thank everybody for listening. I hope I didn't cloud things up a whole lot more than I answered. But thank you all for being here.